All right, this video is about the basics of using Underglaze on your project that hasn't been fired. So for my second period class through sixth period, it's the Noggin project. For my first period class, it's the shoe. But I'm going to use the Noggin as the example. So I'm going to change my camera. This one in there. All right. Get this focused. Okay, so if your project still has moisture in it, it's fine. It doesn't matter that it isn't completely dry. So here's one that's completely dry. Okay. You can see the color difference. Okay. This one's been sitting in the bag for quite a while. It actually smells kind of stinky, like moldy, but it's not a problem. And there's a little spot there of mold. There's probably some mold on the inside. It's okay if I take the plastic out now since it's already being fired. Let's see what happens. Probably safer now, actually. Okay, all right. Okay, so both of these can be glazed. And we are using underglazes. And the underglazes, move these guys out of the way. Underglazes, they're marked UG, at least in the big containers. It's also the same as that first brown I gave you. It says UG, it's an underglaze. But you were supposed to pick a base color for your project. So whatever you're going to end up painting most of it in. And so I have red right now. And then there were these little pods of color for whatever colors you needed. They're just not, these are attached still, but the ones you probably grabbed aren't attached. Okay, all right, so what are we gonna do? Well, I'm gonna show you how to put the glaze on. I'm also gonna show you how to mix some colors. All right, let me move these out of the way. Oh, and before that, we gotta make our glaze plan. So I am, use this one. The glaze plan is the very first step, and you draw out your noggin. It does not have to be perfect, just something that gives you the idea of where the shapes are. And then you're going to want to label it with the colors you're going to use. So if I want this to be a tan color, I would just write tan. And then you may not know the formula yet, but to make tan, I can either get it already made. This is the tan that was on the cart, the UG tan, or I can make it. And if I'm going to make it, the recipe is yellow plus red plus blue. And if I want it to be a really light skin tone, I would add white, because these colors make brown, right? Instead, maybe I don't want it to be tan. Okay, just cross that out. Maybe I want it to be pink. Okay, and pink is an option on the cart in one of the big cups, so I could have grabbed that, or I could make it. So if I want to make a brighter pink, I would take white and add red, right? Okay. There will be a color wheel at the end of this video that you can use, and I will also post the color wheel into the project and in the agenda, so you can use the color wheel to help you figure out how to get certain colors. All right. So once I have everything labeled, like the eyes brown with black outline, it helps me plan, helps me know what colors I need. It helps me figure out the order of things too. My teeth will be white, you know, or they could be dingy yellow if I want to make it completely gross. Inside a mouth. Black. And we use this to help us keep track of our layers. So yes, I know that these are going to be white, but when I put in one layer of white, I can put a little mark. You can't see that, a little mark, so it tells me I did only one layer. You need 2 to 4 layers of each color. Really 4 is the max. Sometimes we can do 5, but we don't want to get things too thick because they will crack or pop off. So if I wanted to put red stripes over my pink skin for some weird reason, then you know the stripes are adding layers to it, so it can really build up very quickly. All right, once I have this completed and I'm not done with this, then I could be ready to glaze, and I want to make sure that I have my name somewhere. So this is actually still soft enough that I could carve my name in there. I can also use Underglaze to write my name. The great thing about Underglaze is it does not stick to the shelf, so I don't have to worry about it. Now you also have, oh wait, here's the tan. That's the tan that comes in it. There we go. We also have PC glazes for our mugs. Do not get this anywhere near your noggin. This does not go on the noggin. It has to go on things that have been fired. This has not gone through the kiln yet. This will be bad combination. Plus it will stick to my shelf. So please put these away. Do not use the Potter's Choice glazes. Okay. You can use those on the mugs. All right. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to start glazing. All right, so I have my color. I chose red just so you could see it. It's a lot easier for you to see. And take this, and then I need a brush to stir it with. You could even use chopsticks if you have a bunch of like leftover chopsticks at home. You can use those as stirs. I have a ton of these sitting around. And then a brush, which I'm looking for right now. Oh yeah, here's my brush. Okay. And I like to use the chopsticks because I like mixing colors and grabbing little bits of color and stuff. So I'm going to use the chopstick. It's been sitting around a while. How thick do you want your glaze? Well, if you're getting your glazes kind of late, they may be a little dried out, but you want the consistency to be like they're thick where they could drip off the end of your brush or your chopstick. But this is like kind of melted ice cream consistency or Greek yogurt. Okay, sour cream might be a little too thick for this. Okay. Some of the colors are very diluted. They're very watery when we first get them. It's just how they came in the bottle, but you want them to really be this thick. Okay. If you see any cracks developing in your glaze, you need to add a little water. So like this tan is super watery. If I don't want to open it up because it's going to be splash all over the place. This needs to dry out a little bit before I use it. But chances are, if you're getting the tan color, it's been sitting on the cart for a while, it's probably the right consistency now. So when I checked on it last, it looked like they have thickened up quite a bit. All right. Okay, so I've stirred that up. Let me just put this aside. And I'm ready to start glazing my noggin. And I'm going to dip my brush in. Make sure your brush is clean beforehand, but not filled with water. And then I can start kind of floating it over the top. So you will see the brush strokes at first. That's just going to happen because this is the first layer. And even if your noggin is not completely dry, it's not white and completely dry, it doesn't mean that the glaze won't dry. The glaze definitely will dry out. So you can see it already starting to dry. This one, it's pretty stinky noggin. Okay. And I'm just gonna keep adding it, and you want to just put the red wherever, or the whatever color you're using, anywhere you want it to be. Now, if I, like this eye here, if I want this eye to be white, but I go over with red, it's gonna be really hard to cover up because red is such an intense color. And another trick is to follow the curves of your noggin. Don't do stripes all the way down. Follow the way that the, you know, the cheekbone goes. Like as if, so anybody that knows how to apply makeup, as if you're adding like a contour, using a contour brush and adding some sort of makeup on. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't really wear makeup very often. And he's going to be super streaky. Now, if you put a color on here and you hate it, you cannot wash this off. In fact, like if you try to use a sponge on it to wipe it off, all you're going to do is make his face very, very bumpy, as if he has some sort of acne issue, which could be kind of cool if that's what you want, but most people don't want that on their noggin. Okay. I'm going to show you how to remove it, the layer, in just a moment. Okay. So I want all this done. And this takes a little time. If I stay in one area for quite a while, I'll show you what this looks like. If I just sit here and I keep going over and over and over and over the same spot, all I'm doing is wetting this clay down, and then it's gonna start blending into the glaze, and it will not be even. Like there's no way. It's already starting to do it. You can see those little spots, right? There's nothing I can do. I just really try to just get it on there as quickly as possible and try not to go over the same spot so many times. And I really could use a smaller brush for these areas because I'm getting a little sloppy. If you put on like a thick brush stroke down, it's going to stay like that. It's going to stay thick like that. And then you might have some, a chance of it popping off later, which can happen with this glaze too. All right, I'm gonna let this dry. It's not done. You can see, look, I got the whole back there to do, but I just want it to dry a little bit. I would want to get this edge of my nose. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna pause this and let it dry. All right, so I've let this dry for a little bit. I did do a little touch up here, so it's still, you can still see it. But I want to show you the second layer. And I probably would spend a little more time making this nicer. I want to get this video out to you. So my second layer, if I have to do it the next day, that's completely fine, no problem. You still want to stir your glaze. Obviously, I would have stored this with the lid on. And then I'm going to go in a different direction on my second layer. So if I keep going in the same direction, I'm going to end up with really pronounced brush strokes. And I'll have some like thick lines, and then I'll have some thinner areas. It just looks better if you try to go in a different direction, if possible. Like on the cheekbones is a little harder to do. And this will definitely be a brighter red when it's fired. Right now it looks a little darker because of the dark gray underneath, but that's going to lighten up as it starts drying out. I'm just going to go ahead and cover that up because I can do like a black eyebrow on there. Okay. And as you can see, it is starting to get a little more covered. I would do at least probably just do one more layer and try to get into all those little spots. There's like little areas peeking out that haven't been touched. Okay. So All right, I haven't finished, but I want to move on to the next part. So while that dries, I have some spots that I accidentally went over with the brush. That's just going to happen. So if you want to remove that, I mean, I could leave it and then try to get white in there, but I'm going to just use, let's see, what do I have? I have my knife tool still, or even the spoon. Looking for what I have from my clay tool collection, but since this clay has not been fired, I can pretty easily remove that from there. Try not to get clay in my glaze. It won't hurt it, but it's probably gonna make it look inconsistent. I could take this and go and clean that up if I wanted to. So, in fact, if I didn't want it over the whole thing, look at this. I could start pulling this stuff off. I'd want to do this outside and probably wear my mask. Just protect my lungs. But I could scrape this all off if I wanted to. Again, if I use a sponge, it will pull up the chunky rocky pieces in the clay and it will bring them to the surface usually. That's, if I don't like how bumpy my whole thing is before I even started glazing it, I probably should have sanded it down again outside safely and so on. So you can see, so it is a lot more work to pull this off once you started glazing it if it's on a large area, right? So I'll show you that. Okay. I'm going to work on this for a little bit and then I will start recording again. Okay, I want to show you what happens when you are glazing one that's completely dried out. So you can see it's starting, I put a layer just in this one spot so you could see it. Okay, it's really absorbing it. It's probably going to sit on it really nicely, but I also want to address the fact that if you start scraping away like I was doing on the other one with the spoon here, you're definitely going to be pulling up a lot of clay dust, which is not safe for you or your family. So you'd want to do this outside with a mask on, or here's the sponge. If you take your sponge, I know you have a portion of this, you have a small sponge that I gave you. This has already been put into water. If I go and start wiping it, it comes right off. Let's see if it changes the surface. I could be wrong about it. No, I'm right. All right, I'll show it to you in a second. It doesn't completely come off, but most of it comes off. I don't know if you can see how it's pulling that rocky stuff. You can't really do anything about that. I mean, I could try to run a pencil over the surface to clean it up. Pencils, wood tools, anything that's made of wood can smooth clay out pretty easily. It helps, but then we're moving into that territory again where like, oh, we're creating clay dust. So you got to be really careful about that. It's just kind of scratching into it. Yeah, so now it's made this side a little rocky. So that's what I meant by that. So just try to be careful with your glazing. Use a small brush when you need to. You should have gotten 2 brushes with when you got your glazes last time. So, okay, I just wanted to show that to you really quick. All right, layering glazes. Actually, I take that back. Adding shadows and highlights. Let's start with that. So I want to make a darker red so that I can create a shadow here. So I have my red. Get this spoon out of the way. I have a black here. Really, any darker color will be fine. kind of open it up without it exploding everywhere. Okay. And I'm going to use the other end of my chopstick. Stir that up. Got to stir these up too. I'm just going to throw a little on the paper here. You can work on a paper plate or a plastic plate or anything like that. The plastic plates, at least you can use the glaze later. Even if it dries out, you just add a couple drops of water and it will be fine. And now I have this chopstick with red on one end and black on the other. So I'm going to turn it over, grab some of that red using the chopstick. Yeah, I love using these in my painting, my regular painting. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over. Just going to mix that up. Just want a slightly darker color. Now I'm doing this on copier paper, so eventually it's going to break through the paper. So I just have to be aware. I have to pay attention to that. I really like using plastic plates for this, or disposable plates with that plastic coating. Those work pretty well. And grab a smaller brush. Okay. All right. So I want to put some shading, some shadows around the eyes, and I can go directly in with the color and make it a little, and you'll see it once it dries, you'll be able to see that shadow. I can always add more black and do it again if I want to. I'm not too worried about having too many layers because it's kind of a thin layer. Okay. So I'm going to let that dry so you can see what that looks like. Okay. And then I'm going to demo how to start layering colors on this side, that part that I cleared out. Okay. I'm going to use my black. Actually, go back and open that up. I just stirred it, so I'm not too worried about it, but you would want to stir any color you're using normally right before you use it if it's been sitting for a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm going to take I can stir with my brush too. Take this. If you have really nice, fine, thin brushes, those are lovely to work with. I gave you what I could, but I know. Oh, you can't even see what I'm doing. Look at that crazy line. I'm going to do some crazy design with this. I am winging it, but you know, one thing that I haven't been doing was keeping track of my layers, so I'll do that in just a second. Like a little eye patch. I have no idea what I'm doing, so I probably should have planned this before. But I wanted you to see what it would look like when you try to layer on top of a dark color too. Now the black will never look completely black even after it's fired. It'll always kind of look like a dark gray. It's just the nature of underglaze. It takes a clear coat on top and a second firing in order for it to really become that black, like a really strong black color. All right, so if I wanted to do something like that, I could maybe, this is how you would do eyelashes. Maybe not like this, but with a thin brush, you could do eyelashes. That just looks kind of like a crazy patch. All right. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. Probably need 2 coats in order to make that solid because it looks, you can see all the brush strokes. Yeah, but look at this guy. It's really subtle shadow. So that, I actually really like that. Blues, adding blues to, if you have a red or a peach or a tan color or even a brown, adding a little blue to it does make a shadow appear deeper than it is. And I could even put a little bit of a, let me find some white. Here's the white. Grab my other chopstick. I gotta stir it first. Almost forgot to stir it. Yeah. And underglaze is kind of like gelatin sometimes. So it's funny when you watch it move in the cup. All right, so I've got that. And then I'm going to take some of this red that's still on the end of my other chopstick. And then I'm going to mix these together. You usually start with the lighter color and you add the darker color to it because the light color is pretty weak. It gets taken over really easily by the darker color. And what I want is a lighter red, so basically a pink, because I want to add a light highlight. I guess that's what a highlight is, a lighter one, over anywhere where the face comes forward. This is a little trick. So anybody's doing realistic people, trick is you can put a little highlight here. That might be a little too much. I won't know until it dries. That could be a little too strong. I'm going to add some more red to that. Okay, let's try that. That might be a little better, like that. Still seems a little too bright to me. It'll dry a little darker, but it might be too bright. Another trick, and I do this in painting all the time, like all the time, is I will put down that color again. So whatever the color is, if it's a flesh tone, I put that down. If I'm using red, I put down a fresh layer. I don't normally do this on the first coat because you need to put a few coats down to really cover up that clay. So a fresh layer, and while it's still wet, you got to work fast. I go in with my lighter color and I just kind of blend it in there and it smears it in. It's a lot more realistic. I do this with a lot of when I used to do figure painting. So it just blends it in. It's kind of go in there. So I would do the same thing like on the top of the nose. Now, a lot of you don't have to do techniques like this, but if you're trying to add shadows and realistic shading and highlights, this is something you would do. And I usually wait till I get to my last layer to do this. Get a couple two solid layers on, and then the third one, I would do something like this. And you put the line down the middle because that's where the sun's hitting. Put a little on there. And it will dry darker, so it always dries a little darker. Like that. Yeah, sound effects. Okay, you can see what happens with that. I'm going to take a little blue and show you what those shadows look like. It's kind of getting crowded in here, and I got some glaze on my sweater. Yay. Right. So I have this, oh, nope, I got glaze on there. Here, I'm going to take my sponge and clean it off. Now I can do this. Yellow seems to be the color that gets ruined quickly, so just be aware that you don't, get blue in your yellow if you still want to use the yellow. Okay, you can't see what I'm doing. Well, let me move this down a little. All right, so I would take again, I'm just going to cover the shadow so I can show you this next thing. So this is also, it's the same technique. I put down the base color, whatever it is I was working with, and I can add a little bit of blue in there. Actually, blue is a very strong color, so I'm gonna tone it down a little bit for a little red. Purple works. It's basically a purple, ends up being a purple. But then I can go in and go like that. You start adding that in. Yes, it looks like big bags underneath the eyes, but that might be really appropriate for your character. Anywhere that tucks underneath away from the sun, look at that. That makes it look so much more dramatic. It's a good place for a shadow, for a blue tinted shadow. Eyelids. little fold in there is also a great place. I'm going to have some wrinkles. Do something like that. Okay. Might be a little too dramatic for this guy. So it just depends on how much time you want to put into shading these things. Okay, still need to do the eyeball and everything. All right, but I'm going to come back to this. Now, I would normally do another layer of black because I can still see that line work. But I just want to show you what happens when you start putting colors on top. I'm just going to take this, clean off my brush. It's a really nice idea to have a bucket of water too, so you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to use red directly on top. It'll be okay. It may not show great though. So instead, I'm going to do a little. I think I'm going to do pink. White. Adding a little white to a lot of colors too will also help it cover better. Like adding white to your yellow will help it cover better. Yellow is very, very thin, and orange is very, very thin. That means anything underneath will come through. In other words, until your noggin dries out, you'll always have kind of a gray color peeking through. So sometimes adding a little white in there helps. Okay, so if I wanted to, let's see what happens here. Yeah, you can still see it. I could do patterns on top if I wanted to. I'm going to have to do a couple layers at least of this pink in order to hide the black a little better. There we go. This is looking very tribal. Kind of like it. All right. If I wanted to do polka dots, I'm a big fan of adding dots and patterns to everything. You can see it in my paintings online a lot. But if I wanted to add polka dots, first I'd need to let this dry, but I could use the end of my brush. Look, my brush, the end of my brush is round, end of a chopstick, anything like that. But so if I wanted to add maybe blue polka dots, I could go like boop, boop, like that and add cool patterns. Just definitely makes it, I don't know, a lot more interesting, a lot more intricate. Like that. Looking pretty crazy. I know I haven't done the center of the eye yet, so maybe I could go ahead and do that with some blue. Put that in there. Right. Some white, all that. Starting to look, this is more my style here. All right. As for glazing the inside of the mouth, you just have to be super careful. Realize if you try to put white over anything, directly on anything, you'll probably see it, the color underneath it a little bit. Like you'll never be able to get rid of it completely. So if I made the inside of the mouth red and then I did teeth, the teeth will probably end up looking kind of pinkish. And that's something that, you know, I can't really do anything about unless I scraped it off. All right. What else do I want to show you? I showed you making shadows, making highlights. Oh, look, see, that light color is barely there, but enough that it looks like light is hitting it. Outlines, that's one thing I need to show you. Outline really does require you to have a really fine brush, and most of you did not get a super fine brush. So if you have access to one at home, that's what I suggest you use. Right now I'm kind of digging through my brush collection to see. Okay. I'm just thinking of another thing that I would share with you. So these are liner brushes. There's a wonky hair that you probably can't see it. There we go. The bristle that's sticking out. So I just want to be aware of that. This is a liner brush too, but I think it got a little beat up. So I'm going to dip this into the black and let's see what I can do with it. So here's the liner brush. I'm going to practice first on the paper. Feel free to practice. on paper beforehand. Look at that. You can get them really, really long and thin, and what they do is they make thick lines and then thin lines. Great for like creating hair, the appearance of hair. So if you want to make your hair look curly, like this one's breaking off, the paint's actually flaking off. I hate that. So, oh, got a little black there. Okay. So if I wanted to do like real looking eyebrows, I usually use my finger to hold my brush in place, and then I just work my way. Needs more. And you just kind of work your way down. If you make a mistake, you just kind of have to scrape it off or use a wet brush to try to remove it. I'll show you that in a second. And so I just keep working on this to make that eyebrow. I could also create designs. Since my guy doesn't have hair, if I wanted to add hair, I could do something like that. I got it on me. You always have to be aware of where did the glaze end up. Okay, and I could do that a couple of times. So that's kind of the idea with hair. Okay. All right. What was the other thing I was going to show you? I was going to show you liner. Showed you that. I feel like there's one more thing. Oh yeah, dry brush. I was going to show you dry brush. Okay, this is the last thing. And dry brush is exactly that. You get a brush that doesn't have any water. Hopefully it's clean. Beforehand, I'm looking for one that will work. And a lot of times it's one of the funky brushes that got messed up. It's like somebody left it in a container and it got all splayed out. I'm going to see if I can make this one look like a dry brush. Actually, I think this one will do the best job. See how it's already kind of broken up? Yeah, I think this one will work. It's not clean, but it'll be all right. Okay, so let me just clean this off a little bit. Underglaze is not terrible for your, like if you touch it or whatever, there's not really anything bad in it. If you pour it down the sink, there's not really anything bad in it. The other glazes, the PC glazes, yeah, I try not to touch them too much. Underglazes don't seem to ever cause me or any of my students any problems, so I kind of think it'll be fine. But you can see how the brushes kind of splayed out like that. And so what I do is I take some, I want to get a color that you can actually see on the noggin, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to you guys. I just dipped it into some black. I'm going to use my paper to kind of make sure I don't have too much on there. And you can see, like, you can get some cool, like I even got polka dots. That's kind of cool. But if I have really short hair and I would want to show it maybe standing up straight, Bart Simpson probably could use this technique. You would just kind of make a little bit like maybe an orange, a yellow orange. Look at that. That's kind of cool. And then I need to go and dip it back into the black just a little bit and check to make sure I don't have too much on the end of my brush, because that sucks when we do that. And then just try it again. And it will, you'll see it'll dry. It's going to be subtle on this bright color. If I had a white noggin, it wouldn't be as subtle. Okay. Every noggin, even the ones that are white, need to get some glaze on top. Okay. And remember when I used the sponge to clean off that other one? See, there it is. All that bumpy stuff will never ever go away. It will always be there. So that's what happens when you use a sponge. All right. So that's it. I would want to make sure that I have my name somewhere. I did scratch it in, but before you guys end up turning these in to be fired, when you're all done, you would want to make sure that you have your name on the back somewhere so I could pick it up, go, okay, that's who it belongs to. Great. Okay. And if you could take out the plastic bag, that'll make it safer for me to handle your work. I'm less likely to break it. All right. Hope you're doing all right with this. And please ask me questions in class if you need to. I am happy to answer them.